today by grounding us and why we're here, and why we do this work, why we're spending our Saturday morning going out and talking to our neighbors. And so, you know, UN35, we started in 2015 after Alderman Carlos Rosa was elected, because there was a group of neighbors who knew that, you know, having someone in office, one of us in office, is important, but it's equally as important having community behind that, and creating a system of co-governance. And so in our time, UN35 has done a ton of things, you know, in addition to doing our electoral work to make sure that we are pushing progressive candidates who are going to work with us and push things for us. We're also doing that work on the ground, talking to our neighbors. What we've seen for a very long time is, you know, disinvestment in our communities. We have seen the ways that our neighbors have been just completely left behind by, you know, these machine politicians, right? And that if they don't have anything to provide for you, you will not receive anything in return. And so we're changing that narrative. Every time we knock on the door, every time we have an event, every time we do mutual aid, we're changing that narrative. And so all of you being here today is so important to that political project, and creating a space where we can love each other, where we can care for each other, where we're not afraid of our neighbors. And so that's what we're doing here today. We're here today to push for our progressive candidates that believe in the same vision that we do and are going to help us create that together. So I am going to start us off by kicking it off to Anthony, our Cook County Commissioner.
Brothers and sisters, I'm so excited to be here with you this morning. As Sandra was mentioning, the work that we've been doing here in UN35 has had a real impact. We have built affordable housing, we have advocated for rent control, we have elected and re-elected progressive champions like Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa, and I've been a member since 2016, and I served as the chair of our organization for a number of years. We worked really hard, especially throughout the years of the pandemic, doing mutual aid work, knocking on doors, reaching out to our most vulnerable neighbors to make sure that they have the resources and services that they need. But we understood that we needed to elect new leadership. And when we came together last year, we said we need to have a new Cook County Commissioner. We ran my campaign, we won in a 5-way race. Great honor of serving alongside my brother, Brandon Johnson, but the joke that I've been saying out on the county board is that he's not going to be with us for much longer because he's going to be on the other side of the hall as our next mayor of the city of Chicago. And the reason why I'm supporting Brandon and Brandon's campaign, and the reason why I'm supporting Brandon's campaign as a socialist, is because Brandon's campaign is doing the real work. Brandon's campaign is building the real coalition of poor, working class people in our communities, of progressive labor unions, of community organizations, of independent political organizations like United Neighbors of the 35th Ward. That is building a multiracial, working class coalition. And why do we need that, brothers and sisters? Why do you think we need that? Because when we fight for affordable housing, when we fight to tax the rich, when we fight to reopen our mental health care clinics, when we fight for a modern CTA, when we fight to combat climate change, guess who's going to stand in our way? The rich, the powerful, the greedy, the well-connected, the corrupt. And those are powerful people, brothers and sisters. If they weren't so powerful, we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be struggling for justice. But we're struggling for justice because the power of injustice is very strong. But I know that people power is stronger. And the only campaign in this race for mayor that understands the power of people is Brandon Johnson for Chicago mayor. And we cannot let up this opportunity. That is why we're here today, because we have to go out to our neighbors as we've done every single election before now. And we need to talk to people about the promise of this campaign, about the vision of this campaign, and why we trust Brandon Johnson to be our next mayor. So, are you going to do that with me today, brothers and sisters? Are we going to go out and talk to our neighbors and tell them why Brandon is our next mayor? I can't hear you. Are you going to go out there and talk to people about why Brandon is going to be our next mayor? Yeah. That's what I like to hear. So now to kick us off to our next leader, Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa.
is so exciting to be with you all here today for this day of action for Brandon Johnson and our district council candidates. I want you to give a round of applause to Saul Arellano, Jacob Arena, who are both running against FOP candidates to make sure that we have progressive representation in this new position, our police district councils. It's a new day in Chicago. It's an exciting new day in Chicago. I remember back in 2011, I was knocking doors for a candidate named Miguel Del Valle. And he was running against, nowadays we say that. But at that point in time, he had been a long-time progressive champion who was running against Rahm Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel had left DC, had come to Chicago. He was gonna bring all his connections from the East Coast. He was gonna bring all this money, and he was gonna, bring a new day to the city of Chicago. And instead, what we got was a neoliberal mayor who shut down schools, who shut down mental health clinics, who made sure that the rich and the powerful were taken care of while our neighborhoods were left behind. After the murder of Laquan McDonald, our community rose up. Our community fought back. And Mayor Rahm Emanuel, because of the strength of our progressive movement, could not run for a third term. And then we had this individual who came and looked at everything we had been working to achieve. Removing the carve-outs from the Welcoming City Ordinance, creating community control of the police, reopening the shuttered mental health clinics, investing in our public schools, investing in our neighborhoods, and took all the work that we had done and said, I'm going to implement this. And a lot of people, including right here in this ward and all across the northwest side of the city of Chicago, voted for her, believing that we were finally going to have someone in office that was going to undo the harm that Mayor Rahm Emanuel had caused to our neighborhoods and to our families. But she had no commitment to keep those promises. They were just empty words. And so I think we, as Chicagoans, we've got to vote smarter this time.
That's
Right? And we really have to think about, it's not just what you say, it's what you've done.
That's right.
It's not just what you say, it's how you get things done.
That's right.
And so in Brandon Johnson, we have someone who has spent his entire life, he's still a young guy though, so he's still got a lot more life, which is good. But he spent his entire life fighting for social and economic justice, fighting to make sure that the most vulnerable, most harmed families in our communities have the things to make them whole. He's done that as an organizer, going down to Springfield, fighting to get more funding for our Chicago public schools. He's done that as an educator, teaching our kids to have pride, teaching our kids that they too can achieve great things. And he's done that now as a Cook County Commissioner. See, when George Floyd was murdered, and a lot of politicians turned their back on the people that were out marching in the street, Brandon Johnson said, I want to take that movement and I want to legislate for that movement in the halls of power. And he made sure that Cook County passed the budget for Black Lives, ensuring that money went out for families on the west side and the south side of the city. So now in this moment, there are a lot of people that want to tell us, well, I'm progressive because of where I was at 30 years ago. No, that doesn't cut it anymore. Because progressive means movement. Progressive means something is coming alive. That's what progressive means. And our communities have been coming alive. We've been dreaming for a better tomorrow. We've been coming up with solutions like treatment, not trauma, reopening our shuttered mental health clinics, using them as centers of care in our neighborhoods where teams of non-law enforcement mental health first responders can help our homeless neighbors, can help our neighbors in mental crisis. Only one mayor on that debate stage, only one candidate, I'm already calling him mayor, only one candidate on that debate stage committed fully to treatment, not trauma, and that's Brandon Johnson. So we need a mayor on that board that isn't going to fight our communities when we come up with bold solutions to the issues in our neighborhoods. We need a mayor that's been there dreaming with us. We need a mayor that's been there walking with us. We need a mayor to walk with us into the fifth floor to make sure that we can finally undo the harm of Rahm Emanuel and bring forth progressive policy that's in the interest of all of us. Is that right?
That's right.
So I'm so excited, because there are people all across the city that are gathering just like we are today. They're gathering 5 at a time, a dozen at a time, 50 at a time. This is the only campaign that has this many grassroots volunteers on their doors weekend after weekend. You can look at the pictures, you can look at the events. So we've got the excitement, we've got the movement, and we've got the candidate, sisters and brothers, Brandon Johnson, the next mayor.
Being here today, I'm just so overwhelmed and really overjoyed and humbled by the work and the willingness to work, the mindset to work. I mean, I believe it's one of the greatest powers that we ever have, is to have a mind and a willingness to do the work. And I know that's not easy. I know it's not. And I'm grateful for the work. It's also good to know that you all have been at this for a little while. Y'all know a little something about movement building. So it's actually quite comforting to be in a room of individuals who, like, the way y'all looking at me, like, I feel like I'm in a locker room at a football game. Like, you're just ready for me to say, let's go get them. I mean, the intensity right now, it's making me a little nervous, kind of, but I'm blushing because when I talk about having a mind to work, and I promise I'll be brief, because it'll prevent me from crying, and there's a video going. But, so, I think folks have done a pretty good job telling who I am, and I don't want to take it for granted that everyone here knows me, but I want you to at least know why I am. Because I didn't just get here, you know. So I come from a large family, it's 10 of us. My parents were just amazing human beings, raising us all in a working class neighborhood with one bathroom, right? I mean, so we learned to negotiate really early in life. When you have sisters, you figure it out. So my father was a public employee, and he was also a general contractor, a carpenter, and he was also a pastor. So you all know, if your father's a carpenter and a pastor, there's a lot of pressure there for him. And it didn't always work, even though we had a willingness and a mind for it to work, because of the failures of the political structure that made it hard to raise families. So I know Carlos said that I'm young-ish, so I'm a product of the 80s. And if you know anything about the 80s, when Reaganomics began to set up shop, it made it really, really hard for working people. And so I know what it's like to come home and after school, and you turn on the faucet and the water's not on. Like, those were rough days. You know, we would have these long orange extension cords that would go from a neighbor's window to ours, to be able to share electricity. And I consider myself, we understood of ourselves as low income. We weren't even the poorest. And growing up in a family where we learned to lean on one another, but it wasn't always easy, it taught me valuable lessons. But because of those challenges that we had, though, my older brother had a lot of untreated trauma. And he was my hero. I looked up to him as the first in the family to go to college. He was one of the top wrestlers in the state of Illinois, heavyweight. He played the saxophone, brilliant. But because he went year after year after year, particularly at a time in which we didn't have the language or the support or the resources, he died addicted and unhoused. When Carlos talks about treatment, not trauma, and having to fight the previous administration for closing mental health clinics, and then fighting this administration because she refuses to reopen them, I just want you to know the why. I'm not saying I don't have an ego. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is I'm driven by the stories that we collectively share. My brother will be a grandfather today. I believe he will be alive today if the political structure provided the necessary resources that my brother needed. And the only thing society could do was criminalize him. And he would apologize, he would repent. I don't know if any really church people in here, he would go to the altar and cry out and ask for forgiveness. But there was no one there to absorb and receive what he was really dealing with. The city of Chicago is under the grip from political systems and structures that have further traumatized our communities. But I believe it doesn't have to stay that way. It doesn't. And the work that you all are doing to elect not just progressive champions, but on a platform and a vision that people can not just get excited about, but see the possibility of their health through it. See, when we talk about fully funded neighborhood schools, think about the things that draw us all together. Whether you are wealthy or struggling in poverty, you got to apply to have a school to go to. Whether you are wealthy or whether you are poor, the trauma that we are experiencing, we don't have facilities and services that are publicly funded and supported to provide that help. We all use public transportation one way or another, or one time or another. And we're all waiting for this system to finally respond to the people. But guess what? The system is being pushed to respond because the people are pushing the system to respond.
That's right.
That's what this moment is about. And so today, as you knock on doors and you tell your personal stories, it's always about the why. The good news about being with you all today is I don't have to fire y'all up. Like, there's a certain level of energy that Anthony Quesada has already brought to the County Board of Commissioners. By the time I'm sworn in, they're not even going to know that I'm not even there. He takes up a lot of room there, trust me. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing, because in this moment, we have to challenge one another. We have to push one another. Coming from a large family, we argued over the Thanksgiving menu, I promise you, every year, and it's the same freaking menu. Not at my house, and make sure there are greens. I'm done. There's nothing else to negotiate, right? But in this moment, we get to tell our stories. We also get to lay a platform and a vision that people can get behind and get around. And so from the bottom of my heart, really, for the families that need mental health facilities to not just reopen, but to be available throughout the city of Chicago, to the families that need fully funded neighborhood schools, to the families that rely upon public transportation, to the families that are looking for environmental justice. Because of families like mine, I grew up with asthma, and to have an environment that is not responsible to the communities in which have been stratified for generations is incredibly irresponsible. But to those families, you all, we tell our stories and then we give them hope. And here's the last thing, I promise. What Carlos said about what is happening across the city, I promise you all, take his word. We're there. From Ravenswood to Inglewood, from Jefferson Park to McKinley Park, West Side, Southwest Side, Southeast Side, there are people across this city that believe that a better day is ahead. And I know we can get this done with Carlos, with Rosanna and Jeanette. Think about what city council is going to look like when I'm sworn in and you got Carlos, Rosanna, Jeanette. Do I have to name anybody else? Just the four of us alone. We're shifting the political atmosphere because of the work that you all are doing. And so from the bottom of my heart, you all enjoy the weather, because I know when Anthony and I were collecting petitions, that was a different type of winter. We actually have something that we can actually breathe in. So thank you all again. God bless you. The Chicago, the city that we deserve, is going to be better because of